Welcome to Walker Valley, Washington, site of round number 6 of the World Observed Trials Championship Series. We're here in the parking lot of the Everett Pacific Hotel, which was the trials headquarters, watching a few of the riders as they loosen up a bit before tomorrow's event. Gilles Bagat, 1981 World's Champion from France on a 250 Yamaha. Eric Lejeune from Belgium, 250 Honda. Young rider to watch here, Diego Bozes from Italy, a factory Montesa. And Thierry Michaud from France, 1985 World Champion, and presently leading the 1986 series. The weather today is perfect for riders and spectators, with sunny skies and temperatures in the lower 70s. The rain stopped last week, allowing most of the sections to dry out, except for the ones in the woods, which stayed fairly wet and slick. There was a good variety of sections here to challenge the riders and keep the spectators impressed. This trials was a job well done by the Pacific Northwest Trials Association. The loop was 9.5 miles long with 17 sections to be ridden 3 times. The time limit was 7 hours and 20 minutes with no grace period. To keep you more informed on the sections and riders, you'll notice underneath the section number the average points lost per rider in that section, also the total number of fives taken by all riders in that section. There were 40 riders in this event, giving 120 rides per section. From this, you can tell how difficult a section is going to be. Also, I'll give all 3 scores the rider had on that section, plus end of each loop scores for the top 10 riders. These are the point standings for the first 5 events. Ron Como was the first rider in section number 1. Ron had a 3 as second loop, a 3 as third loop, and he's just picked up a 5 on his first loop through this very slippery Rock Creek section. Going into section number 2, Ron picked up a 3 on his second loop and a 5 on his third loop. And he picks up a 5 here. Mark Manico from Colorado with a 5 as second loop, a 3 as third loop. He takes kind of an abrupt 5 on his first loop. Bill Sparks, Canada. It's a 5, a 3, and a 5. Ron Schmelze from Colorado. With 3 5s on this section. Kip Webb from California. With 3 3s in this section. Next start in section number 1, U.S. National Champion Scott Head from California with a 1 as second loop, 5 as third loop, and a clean this loop. There's an unidentified rider, 5 section number 2. Scott's riding section 2 now. Going to pull a 3 out of this. Got a 1 as second loop and a clean as third loop. Philippe Polladier from France, section 1. On an Aprilia. He had 3 cleans in this section. In the section number 2, he had a 1 and a clean. And on his first ride through, he gets a 1. Young rider to keep your eye on, Jordi Terrace from Spain. Riding a Beta 250. And he gets a 1 and 2 cleans in this section. In the section number 2, picks up a 1 there. And clean his last 2 rides. Bernie Schreiber from California, now living in France, on a 350 Yamaha. 1979 World's Champion. Picked up a 5 his second loop, a clean his last loop. And he scores a 3 his first time through. And in section 2, Bernie had a 1 and 2 cleans. 1985 World Champion Thierry Michaud with a 1, 2 his second ride, and a clean his last time through. Riding section number 2 now. And he had a 1 all 3 rides in this section. Tony Scarlett from England with a clean, a 1, and a 1. Eddie Lejeune from Belgium, riding a 250 factory Honda. 1982, 83, and 84 World Champion. Had a 1, a 2, and a clean on section 1. Number 8, Diego Bozes, with a 5, a 1, and a 1. Eddie Lejeune now in section number 2. Have a clean ride here. A 1 and a clean. England's top rider, Steve Saunders, on a 250 factory Honda, similar to Eddie Lejeune's. Rides through this with a clean, and a 1. Steve gets into a bit of a balancing act here. It's a pretty deep pool of water just about where his front wheel is there. It's presenting quite a bit of difficulty for most of the riders coming over that ledge and then dropping down into that pool of water. And Steve pulls 3 cleans out of this section. Mark Manico from Colorado, running section number 3. Fairly difficult rock section. Now we switch to our second camera for the rest of the ride. And Mark had 3 5s on this section. Bill Sparks from Canada on a Beta. 5 this round, and 3 is second, 3 is third. Andy Song from Arizona. At a 5 is second and third loops. Riding a 250 Yamaha Majesty. Shift in the third gear. And he takes the scary way down. He was all right. Nothing hurt. Scott Head from California on a Beta. Scott had a 5 as second and third loops. The riders don't have to go up and around in that area he just rode. There is an easier way through this section, as you'll see here shortly. And Scott's the first rider through with a clean. A view of the Walker Valley countryside. It's located about an hour and a half's drive north of Seattle. And the south part of this hill that everybody's climbing. Nice sunny day, temperature around 70 degrees now. As we watch Brian Young, right, section number 3. Brian's riding a beta this year. Good up-and-coming young rider to watch. Brian had a 2 his second loop and a 1 his last loop on this section. Philippe Balladier from France on Aprilia. He cleaned this his second and third rides. Philippe is going to ride a different line up the hill. Probably a much easier line. Just pivot turn right back down the hill. Nicely done. And he scores a 1. The photographer is Bev Anderson, the top woman rider in Australia, who's up here to ride our first 5 national rounds on a beta, sponsored by Qantas Airlines. As we watch Eric Lejeune take a 5 on his 250 Honda. And Eric had a 3 and a 2. Last 2 rides through this section. Jody Terrace from Spain, factory prototype beta. This will be the model that will be produced next year. The rear suspension system is a bit different. The seat height is about 1.5 inches lower than the current production beta. And he cleaned this section his last 2 rides. Jordy's also one of the few riders to be running the new tubeless rear tire. And he scores a clean. Number 1 world rider Thierry Michaud from France. This factory 301 Fanic. And his bike's pretty much a stock production model without too many visible changes on it. He had to clean his last 2 loops on this section. Nice. And that's a real good ride. He scored a clean. Freddie Michaud from France, 301 Fanic, Thierry's older brother. Freddie DNF'd this event, exceeded the time limit. He had a 3 as second ride and a 3 as third. And he takes a 5 on his first ride through. Bernie Schreiber from California, 1979 World's Champion. Bernie was on a Bultaco that year when he won the championship. And he just switched to a 350 Yamaha for the Spanish round. Seems to be doing pretty good on this bike. Bernie cleaned this each of his last 2 rides. And he scores a 2 on his first time through. Well, the young riders to keep your eye on, Diego Bozes from Italy. It's factory Montesa. He's a real good trick rider, along with Jordi Terrace. Nice hop turn there. Had a 1 his second loop, a 2 his last loop, and he's going to be scored a clean on his first ride through. Eddie Lejeune from Belgium, 250 factory Honda. These bikes are a lot different from the stock 250s. These have larger diameter fork tubes, different swing arm in the back, internal differences on the engine, oil cooler, whole different clutch assembly, and the frame appears to be changed somewhat. Honda only made 3 of these bikes, one for Eddie and one for Steve, and the third one is locked up in the Honda European headquarters in Belgium. Eddie's going to be scored a 1 on this ride, and he cleaned this his last 2 loops. Section 4, just down the hill from Section 3. Just a big, long rock field. Trying to hold your line through here, or remembering where to ride, is probably the biggest challenge. This section was fairly easy with a 1.92 points lost per rider. Pascal Couturier, presently riding from France on a JCM. Pascal had a 2 this ride, a 1, and a clean. Bernie Schreiber now dropping into the section. Bernie had a clean his second ride and a 2 his third ride through. Steve Saunders had a clean, a 2, and a clean. Jordi Terrace on this section had 3 cleans. Thierry Michaud had a 3, a 1, and a clean. And Philippe Belladier had a clean, a 1, and a 2. And a good ride from Bernie here with a clean.
Dana, going down, you want to come on in? Okay, we'll be down at the next one.
And we moved about halfway up the hill to get a little different angle to the camera. Eddie Lejeune presently riding the section. He had a 1 each of his last 2 loops. Fairly easy section if you can remember where to ride. And he scores a clean. It's about 100 yards down the road to section number 5. We'll catch the first part here, Jordi Terrace riding. It was a fairly long section, very difficult to film. Jordi had 2 cleans and a 1 in that section. Roberto Gioberto, presently riding from Italy on a Fanic 301. He had a 3 and a 2.
Nice try.
Last 2 rides, and he took a 5 his first time through. Thierry Michaud, presently riding. Had a clean in each of his last 2 rides. Section kind of snakes up the hillside, and he scored a clean. This section is back in the woods. Not too much sun gets in here to dry it out. The rocks were very slick. As we watch Bernie Schreiber entering the section, getting high up on the rock there temporarily. He had a clean and a 1 of his last 2 rides, and he takes a 5. Eddie Lejeune, next rider. Very slippery rock right there. And he's going to get a clean out of this section his first time through. Second time he had a 2. Third time through he had a 1. Good clutch work here from Diego Bozes on his Factory Montesa. He had a 2 each of his last 2 loops, and he scored a 3 on his first time through. We're down here at the entrance of the section now for a different camera angle as we watch Steve Saunders. He had probably the most difficult part of the section there. He had a clean his last loop, a 2 his second loop, and he scores a clean on his first time through. Sections 6 and 7 were too far away for us to cover. Section 6, however, was pretty easy, with just a little bit less than 1 point per rider lost. Section number 7 was the 4th hardest section at 3.16 points lost per rider. We're presently at section number 8, which was just up the creek from sections 1 and 2. Basically, it drops into the creek, makes a turn under the bridge through a pool of water right there, which was kind of tricky, and then back up the creek. Andy Song from Arizona, presently riding. Andy had a 3 his second loop and a 5 his third loop. The most difficult part of the section is probably right in this area. Very slick off-camber rocks here to go over. Once over these, it's just a matter of picking your way through the rocks to the exit as Andy scores a 3 on his first ride through. Gerald Richardson from England on a 250 Yamaha. A lot of people sitting on the bridge right above him. And part of the bridge all of a sudden falls down on him as he's riding. And naturally he's going to get a re-ride out of this. And he did pull 3 3s out of this section. Gabino Renales from Spain, the next rider, on a 325cc gas. This bike is more or less a prototype model being put together by the former SWM manufacturer. And Gabino pulls a 3 his second loop, a 1 his third loop, and he scored a 3 his first time through this section. And the pretty checker for this section. A lot of spectators around. It was a very easy section to get to. The basic water dog. Next rider, Philippe Balladier from France. Riding in Aprilia. His rocks are becoming very slick right there as he takes a 5. Had a clean his second ride, a 2 his last ride through. Jody Terrace from Spain had a 3 his second ride, a 1 his third. And makes these rocks look like a highway as he rides right up them. And he winds up taking a 2 for his first ride through. Thierry Michaud. Nice balancing act. Little clutch adjustment. Had a 3 as second, a 2 as third ride. Another nice ride over the hardest part of the section, and he winds up scoring a 3. Pascal Couturier from France on the JCM had a 1 and a 2 as second and third loops. Again, makes that difficult part look fairly easy. He scores a 2. Gilles Brigat, 1981 World's Champion. And he won that championship on an SWM. He comes up to the difficult part of the section. He had a 2 as second loop, a 3 as third. Still fairly difficult part of the section to get out here. And he pulls a 3 his first ride through. Eddie Lejeune from Belgium. Had a 3 as second, a 1 as third. And he scores a 3 on his first time through. Last rider through is Steve Saunders as he gets into a bit of trouble coming out of the pool of water just underneath the bridge. He cleaned this his last loop, had a 2 on it his second loop. That's right, Steve. Gets up the hard part very easy. And he gets a 3 his first time through. With 20 sections in this trials, it would have been too long for the FIM time limitations, so sections 9, 11, and 12 were eliminated. That brings us to section number 10, as we watch Ron Schmelze from Colorado ride. And Ron had 3 5s on this section. Kip Webb from California, the next rider, on a beta. This section was the 5th hardest, with a 3.10 average points lost per rider, 64 total 5s. And Kip's going to get a 3 out of this, a 5 and a 5. The West German champion Matt Newkirchen now riding on a 301 Fanuc. Matt had a 5 and a 3, second and third loops. Lower part is the most difficult part of the section. And he falls into a fairly deep hole here. He scored a 5. Number 1 Canadian rider, Steve Tracy. On a beta. Steve had a 3 and a 5, second and third loops. And he gets into a bit of trouble here, and he scored a 5. Ron Como from Vermont on a beta. And Ron had 3 5s in this section. Scott Head from California, the next rider. Scott just won the U.S. National round the day before. Scott had a 5 and a 3, his second and third loop. Let's do the most difficult part, fairly easy. And he scored a 1 on his first ride. Greg Bolt from New York, the next rider on a 250 Honda. And Greg had 3 5s on the second. Stan Bacard, former Canadian #1, running a 250 Yamaha. Stan had a 5 his last 2 loops. And he pulls a 1 his first time through. Ian Rawlings from England on a 250 Yamaha. Had a 5 and a 3. And slides in that hole for a 5. Eric Lejeune from Belgium, 250 Honda. And he finds an off-camber slick rock behind that big rock and takes a 5. And he had a 3 on each of his last 2 rides through this section. Very slick rocks in this section also. Gabino Renales on the Gas finds the same slick rock that Eric found for a 5, and he had a 1 and a 3 his second and third times through. Juan Briexis from Spain on a 350cc Merlin. 5's on the same rock, had a 3 a second and a 5 his third ride through. Felipe Berladier had a 3 and a 5. Gets up the most difficult part and scores a 2. Jordi Terrace from Spain, the next rider. Jordi's 19 years old, former 3-time European bicycle champion. Had a 2 and a second loop, a clean on his last loop. He maneuvers the most difficult part of the section. And he takes a 1 for his only point in that section. Johnny Anderson from Sweden on a 301 Fanuc. Last year he was riding a factory Yamaha. Had a 3 and a 2, second and third loop. And he scores a 5. Bernie Schreiber now riding. Bernie had a 1 and a 2, his second and third loops. Bernie now lives in Albertville, France. He's down in the French Alps. He's married to the sister of Gilles Bergat. And him and Gilles run a very successful trial school up there in the mountains. For more information on that school, you can contact Action Video, as Bernie scores a 1 in his first ride. For one rider, Thierry Michaud, 1985 World Champion, also leading the 1986 series. He had a 5 his second loop and a 1 his third. And he's going to score a 2. Andrew Codina from Spain on the Montesa. Had a 2. The second and third loops each. And he gets a little off balance and takes a big 5. Eddie Lejeune, presently riding. Had a 1 and a 3, a second and third loop. We've got a second camera on this now. We'll pick up the rest of the action from up above at the exit. And Eddie scores a clean ride. Steve Saunders from England, the next rider. Steve had a clean and a clean his last two loops. Steve gets into a little bit of trouble here. He manages to keep it balanced. Puts his foot down for a turn. And we'll pick this up from the second camera now. Watch him come up
This is the first gorgeous one, Dale.
the last couple edges to the exit.
Prettier.
And he gets a 3 out of this. Section 19 was about 100 yards over a small hill on the return loop. So that we come over here and catch a few of the riders as they complete their first loop. Gerald Richardson from England, the Yamaha. Pretty tricky entrance here, probably the hardest part of the whole section. As we switch to our second camera, Gerald had a 2 the second loop, a 1 his third. And for his first ride, he's going to score a 3. Scott Head, the next rider. Smog was very slick. And this one was slicker. Scott had a 1 and a 3. Second and third loops as we go to the second camera. And nice ride with the 2. Section 20 was just a few steps down the creek from section 19. Scott had a 1 his second loop, a 3 his third loop. And he scores a 2 in his first ride. The hardest part of the section is right down here. Coming out of the water, you had to turn and come up a groove. And there was a real slick hillside right here. And Ian Rawlings takes a 2 right there. Got a 1 his second loop and a 3 his third. Back at section 19 to catch the rest of the riders through on the first loop. Good ride from Bernie. He won this, all 3 loops. Tony Scarlett from England, running at 250, John Chert Yamaha. Had a 1 his second loop, a 2 his third loop. He's into a bit of trouble here, but he's still on a 3. Pick up the second camera. It right at that point. Jody Terrace from Spain in his factory prototype Beta. Jody had a 2 and a 1, second and third loops. He gets a 2. Thierry Michaud, next rider, scored a 1 his second ride, a 2 his third loop. And there's one of the few 5s Thierry takes. Pascal Couturier from France, JCM. He scored a 1 each of his last 2 loops. scored him a 5 there. Andrew Codina from Spain. La Montesa had a 2 and a 1 last 2 loops. Takes a 5 on the select part. Some of the factories employ helper riders for their top riders. This is Fulvio Adamoli, who's a helper rider for this man, number 8, Diego Bozes. Jean-Marie Lejeune, a helper rider for Eddie Lejeune. And Freddie Michaud is a helper rider for his brother Thierry. Good technique here on Diego's part. He had a 1 and a clean in his second and third loops. And he's the only rider to clean this section twice as he pulls off the clean here for his first ride. Factory mounted Honda rider Steve Saunders from England had a 1 and a 2, second and third loop. Another good ride with the clean. Eddie Lejeune preparing to ride on his factory Honda. Bev Anderson prepares to take his picture. Eddie had a 2 and a 1, his second and third loops. Diego Bozes had the best ride through this section with a total of 1 point lost. Philippe Berladier had the next best ride with a 1 on his first loop, a 1 on his second loop, and a clean on his third loop for 2 points lost. And Eddie gets through this with a 1. Section 13, second loop, Eddie Lejeune. Had a 5 on this section, his first loop. A clean, his last loop. As we follow him through the section. And he scores a 2. Ian Rawlings from England. It's 250 Yamaha, next rider. So pick him up on the second camera. He had a 3 on this his first loop, a 2 his third loop. Nice trick turn there as he takes a clean for his second ride. And Eric Lejeune on the hardest section here. Eric had a 3 his first loop, a 3 his third loop, and he gets a 5 on the second loop. This section was kind of a series of switchbacks up a very steep hillside. A lot of real slick mud, rocks. Stan Picard takes 3 5s in this section. A lot of tight turns between the trees, over the slick muddy rocks. Very difficult to find traction. Andy Song from Arizona had 3 5s in this section. Jordy Terrace had a clean, a 2 and a 1. Steve Saunders had a 1, a 2 and a 3. Thierry Michaud had a 5, a 2 and a 3. Eddie Lejeune had a 5, a 2 and a 1. Section 15 was the third hardest section. However, it had the most 5s at 75. Scott Head, the rider from California. Scott had a 3 his first ride, as we pick him up on the second camera. Had a 3 on his third loop. Very slick rocks right here, probably the most difficult part. It gets a 5. Tony Scarlett from England. It's a 5 on his second ride. He had a 1 on his first loop and a 1 on his last loop. Luis Galac from Spain on a Montesa with a 3 his first loop, 3 his third, and a 5 for his second ride. Jordy Terrace had a 1 his first loop and a 1 his last loop. And Jordy scored a clean. Terry Michaud with the clean his first and last loops. Good ride with the 1. Roberto Chiaberto with a 3, a 5, and a 2. Steve Saunders coming off the rock pile. First part was fairly easy. The log probably was the second hardest part of the section. And the hardest part of the slick rocks coming up to the exit. And a big 5 for Steve. He also 5'd the first loop and cleaned the last loop. Diego Bozes with a clean on his first ride, a 2 on his last loop. And a big 5 as his rider helper, Fulvio Adamoli, comes to his assistance. Scott Head is getting ready to ride the second hardest section in the trials. Scott had a 3 his first loop, a 3 his last loop. And the hardest part of the section right there with that big rock, followed by a real tight left turn and a right turn coming up. And he gets a 5 right here. Bernie Schreiber, the next rider from California, had a 3 his first loop and last loop. This rock was also very slick. Bank turn right there. Through some rocks, pretty difficult part. Over a couple of logs here, which were very slick. After going over this second log, it was a very tight left turn. Back over one of the logs, up a bank, a real tight right turn to the exit. And he scored a 3. Cabina Renales on the gas. It's a 5. He also had 2 3s on this section. Jordy Terrace coming over the entrance rock. Nice turn off the rock wall. Some pretty good sized logs and they're real slick. Nice technique. Jordy had a 5 on his first ride, a 2 on his last loop. It's through here with a 1. Terry Michaud from France gets hung up on a rock at the very beginning of the section. He's got the hard part yet to go. Nice clutch technique. Good job of recovering his balance. had one on this first and third rides. And he gets a 3. A little protest there about the scoring. Next rider, Philippe Barladier. Doesn't quite make it. At a 1, a 5, and a 5. It's a nice gesture by the checker to pick up the rider's bag. Gilles Bagat from France. At a 2, 5, and a 3. Steve Saunders from England. Steve had a 1 his first loop, a 3 his third loop. And he's going to clean this section. Him and Pascal Couturier are the only 2 riders to score clean on this section. Real nice clutch technique there by former 3-time world champ Eddie Lejeune. Eddie had a 1 his first loop, a 3 his third loop. Nice clutch riding. And he scores a 2. The West German champ, Matt Newkirchen. In a very slick rocky stream section. Hardest part for this section is right there at the exit, getting over those very slick rocks. And Matt took 3 5s on this section. Eddie Lejeune, the next rider, had a 5 his first loop, clean his last loop. Should pick him up on our second camera, coming toward the exit. Nice ride with a clean. And Eddie's brother, Jean-Marie Lejeune, who exceeded the time limit and DNF'd the event. He was the last rider for loop number 2. And now we'll take a look at some of the scores. From Pennsylvania, rider in section 17. Brian had a 3 and a 2 his first 2 loops. Section's fairly easy at the start. A couple of ledges to go over at the exit, which is probably the hardest part of the whole section. Right from here to the exit, the hardest part, over those 2 ledges, which are very slick and muddy. And a good ride with a clean, as his dad, Jerry Young, watches. Neil Belvoir from California had 3 5s in this section. Scott Head with a 3 and a 1 his first 2 loops. And gets the traction to get out the exit for a 3. Stan Bacard from Canada with a 3 and 2 5s in this section. Tony Scarlett from England with a clean and 2 1s. Standing up by the exit now, Thierry Michaud with a clean, a 2, and a clean. Gilles Bagat looking at it from down below again with a clean, a 2, and a clean. Eddie Lejeune had 2 cleans in his first 2 rides. And takes a 1 on this ride. And Diego Bozas riding at 3 cleans on this section. along with Philippe Berlatier. Section 18, the third loop. As we watch Brian Young in his beta. He had a 5 and a 1 his first two loops. Very slick, rocky section. And he gets out with a 2. Good ride. And Jody Terrace from Spain at a 5 and a clean. Real nice ride through here with a clean.
Number 1 world rank.
Bernie Schreiber at a 3 and a clean. First two rides. And he gets out with a 1. World champion Thierry Michaud with a clean on his first two loops. And he gets out with a 1. 1981 World's champion Gilles Brigat from France with a 3 and a 1 his first two rides. And finds a real slick rock there for a 5. Philippe Berlatier with a 3 and a 5 first two loops. Another nice ride with a clean. Eddie Lejeune, the 5 and a clean his first two loops. And he finds lots of traction in there, rides through with a clean. Diego Bozes, a 3 and a 3. Just a bit crossed up there. Nice ride with the 1. Last rider, Steve Saunders, had a 2 and a 3 first two loops. Right now, he's tied for first place with Jordy Terrace. If he cleans this section, he'll win the event by 2 cleans. Jordy Terrace turned in a 13-point third loop, which was the best loop of the day. This put him in first place to win the event with 54 points. Second was Steve Saunders from England on a Honda with 59. Third, Eddie Lejeune, Belgium, Honda, 60. Fourth, Thierry Michaud, France, Fanuc, 62. Fifth, Pascal Couturier, France, JCM, 64. Sixth, Philippe Berlatier, France, Aprilia, 68. Seventh, Diego Bozes, Italy, Montesa, 81. Eighth, Bernie Schreiber, USA, Yamaha, 81. Ninth, Renato Chiaberto, Italy, Fanuc, 84. 10th, Tony Scarlett, England, Yamaha, 87. And 11th, Gilles Brigat, France, Yamaha, with 91.